Did you know that a West Virginia man once escaped from jail using a rope made out of dental floss? Did you know that a kangaroo jumped a pile of lumber 10.5 feet high and 27 feet long? Did you know that there are 18 different animal shapes in the Animal Crackers Cookie Zoo? Did you know that the King of Hearts is the only king without a mustache on a standard playing card? Did you know that one Englishman kept 66 bricks weighing a total of 296 pounds balanced on his head for 10 minutes? Did you know that Iceland consumes more Coca-Cola per person than any other country in the world? Did you know that Heinz ketchup poured from the mouth of an upended bottle travels at an average speed of 25 miles per year? And did you know that you can sing Amazing Grace to the tune of the theme song from Gilligan's Island? Now, don't start going there in your minds because you're starting to do it, I can tell. Don't do it, come back. Oh, I could go on with strange but true facts. I really limited myself. And really, who cares? Did you know that it's better to go to a funeral than to a party? Did you know that it's better to listen to someone's rebuke than listen to a beautiful song with shallow words? Did you know that sorrow is better than laughter, that a sad face is good for you, and that the day of death is better than the day of birth? Did you know that these last few statements are found in Scripture? Yes, Ecclesiastes chapter 7. And you can turn there in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Our passage this morning in our series on Ecclesiastes, we come to chapter 7. And in essence, it says, bad is better. We may wonder as we read this section if Solomon, with his under the sun perspective, just might have gotten too much sun. The statement he makes is rather odd. But with some understanding, I think we're going to find some wisdom in these words. And it's in chapter 7 that really brings us roughly to the halfway point of Ecclesiastes. Solomon has arguably made his point of the futility of life without God. And like a Rubik's Cube, at least for me anyway, when we live with an under-the-sun perspective, life's kind of maddening and frustrating because you just can't seem to get all those colors to line up right. The injustices of life, the unbelieving rich getting richer at other people's expense, the senselessness of working your tail off to only leave all you have earned behind, and the abuses of those in authority who seem to get away with it. I mean, all of that just doesn't seem to line up with how we think life should work. It's maddening, to say the least. In our search for who knows what, can happiness and satisfaction be found in this life? That's what we're exploring. And as we've been making our way through the book of the Bible, hopefully the call to contentment has made its way into your hearts. Hopefully the truism that if God isn't in it, it ain't worth it is becoming more than a catchy phrase. It's impacting the choices we make in the days that we have here on this earth. What I want for you, what I want for me, what I want for EBC is this reality check on what we are really living for. That we're rearranging our schedules, we're reordering our priorities, we're reevaluating what really matters in life. And that's where the first 6 chapters have been taking us in the book of Ecclesiastes. Well, as we come to chapter 7, something changes. The style of writing is different. Beginning with chapter 7, there's a word that gets a lot of attention. It was going to show up 34 times from this point forward. It's a word that has been conspicuously absent from the first half of the book. It is the word wisdom. wisdom. If we're going to really live for what matters, we need wisdom. Now, wisdom doesn't guarantee that you won't go through tough stuff, but does guarantee you can get through it. It's wisdom that sees us through life's heartaches and pains and perplexities. The mysteries of life, we need wisdom. And so as we go through this section of Scripture, it may feel like you're kind of making your way through a box of dry cereal to get to the prize at the bottom. But stay with me, for wisdom's prize is better than gold's. Solomon gives in this section in Ecclesiastes 7, 1 through 14 that we're going to look at, he gives us a series of proverbs. Several contrasting couplets to say that this is better than that. 8 times in 14 verses we find the word better. Now these 14 verses, it's worth noting, they're poetic in its style. And by the way, Hebrew poetry, and maybe this is just a reminder for you, but Hebrew poetry is not built on the rhyming of sounds, but more of the rhyming of ideas. It's built on parallelisms. Parallelisms in which the second line of the couplet helps us understand the first line. And there are a variety of ways that Hebrew poetry uses parallelisms, and I'm not going to get into all that for this morning, because in these 14 verses, it is synonymous parallelism. In other words, the two parts of the couplet are parallel and ought to be read as explaining each other. That's important to note, so don't get lost in this. So Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 1 introduces the poem. Verse 1 begins by stating, a good name is better than fine perfume. Now, in ancient Near East, they would pour on excessive amounts of perfume or cologne, especially when they went to public gatherings or to parties. And this was mostly true, by the way, for men. Men were doing this. And Solomon here compares the perfume or the cologne to a good name. Solomon is saying that perfume or cologne may make you smell better, but it doesn't make you better. Outwardly, we may smell good. We may even look good. But that isn't what life is all about, he says. It's about a good name. A good name. And so then Solomon says this statement that just really seems strange. He says, in the day of death, better than the day of birth. And we go, what? Now you got to think parallelism as we come to the second line of this couplet. A good name parallels the day of our day of our birth, and a good name parallels the day of death, and perfume parallels the day of birth. You got to get that right. Well, at least I got to get it right so I can pass it on to you right. Right? Mist in the pulpit, it's a fog in the pew. So I got to stay with it here. So a good name parallels the day of death, all right? And fine perfume parallels the day of birth. Name, by the way, has to do with your reputation. It has to do with our testimony. So in what way, then, is the day of our death better than our day of our birth? Well, the point seems to be that it isn't until we come to the end of our lives that we truly realize the value of our lives. So if we lived our days just to put on a good face and smell good, then we wasted all the potential of a life well lived. But a good name, a good reputation, a life that has left its mark and made a difference after he is gone is far better, he says, than unrealized potential that is yours when you were born into this world. And that's how he's looking. The day of birth, there's all kinds of potential. But if it's unrealized, and you just say to all of these good intentions, then the day of death it doesn't matter at the end. It doesn't matter. Now, what are the 2 days of our life in which our name is most prominent? The day of our birth and the day of our death. And have you noticed that those 2 dates in an obituary notice are separated by what? A single dash. See, what happens between these 2 days, birth and death, which is represented by a single dash in our obituary, determines whether we have a good name or not. And all that we could have done, our potential, our good intentions with that dash is no better, he says, than just smothering ourselves in the costliest of perfumes. Now, verse 1 introduces everything that will come after it. The rest of this poem now addresses the question, how then shall we live? What will we do with that dash? Those days between our birth, dash, and our death. Because all we have is the dash in between. So Solomon provides us with some nuggets of wisdom on how to spend our dash, our days. He gives us three things here that are really worth grabbing. He says, we learn more from funerals than parties. Secondly, listen more to correction than others singing our praise. And then thirdly, live a little bit at a time rather than all at once. So first of all, we learn more from funerals than parties. It's strange, but true. We learn more from funerals than parties. Look with me at verse 2. It says, it is better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting. Now, why is going to a funeral better than going to a feast or going to a party? I mean, when's the last time you were excited about going to the funeral home? I mean, wouldn't you prefer to avoid that if you could? Did you know that there are drive-through mortuaries? For the convenience of time-pressed mourners, the deceased is displayed before a 5x7 picture window. So you can pay your last respects without even getting out of the car. Now, how about you? It just strikes me as wrong. Wrong. See, we can even rush past staring at the stark reality of death. Solomon say that's a shame. Solomon's saying a funeral home is a great classroom. Knowing life is short as a way of getting our attention, doesn't it? Phoebe Snetzinger had long been an enthusiastic birder or bird watcher, but when a doctor gave her a diagnosis of terminal cancer near her 50th birthday, she said she decided that she was going to travel to even more distant and daunting environments to see the rare bird species. Well, meanwhile, as she was doing all of that, she says, I have short time here I go. Her disease went into remission. And by the time she died at the age of 68, 18 years after her diagnosis, she had spotted a then record 8,400 species, nearly 85% of the world's known winged creatures. Her achievement is admittedly an extreme example of what has become in the broader culture things to experience while you still have time. And interestingly, bird watchers actually call the summation of their years of devotion a life list. Phoebe had her life list. Others prefer to speak of this as a bucket list, a term from the film in which two stricken men set out to do all the things they've wanted to do before kicking the bucket. Well, whatever you might call it, a bucket list or perhaps a life list, I have to ask, what's on yours? Or better put, what should be on that list? I mean, facing death caused a bird watcher to travel around the world to locate rare bird species. What should the reality of the brevity of life push us to do as Jesus' followers? I mean, what do you want to be remembered for? The number of bird species you recorded? Knowing we're bound for eternity, do we even need a bucket list? It's really a life list. Oh, there's so much to be learned at a funeral, Solomon says. He goes on to say in verse 3, sorrow is better than laughter because a sad face is good for the heart. In other words, there's so much more we can learn in times of trouble and difficulty than when we're just living it up with one pleasure after another. One writer said it this way, I walked a mile with pleasure, she chatted all the way, but left me none the wiser for all she had to say. I walked a mile with sorrow, and never a word said she, but oh, the things I learned from her when sorrow walked with me. Isn't that true? Solomon goes on to say in verse 4, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools in the house of pleasure. See, if we're going to leave behind a good name, a good reputation, a good testimony, it will mean we'll pay attention to the lessons of death. You know, it really would not be a bad idea to kind of have to walk through a cemetery as you came to church. You know, I'm not being morbid here, but just stay with me for a second. I mean, you can still find this, by the way, in some small rural churches that have a cemetery right on their property. And as people make their way to church, they have to pass through the gravesite. Not a bad idea. It's a good reminder as we come into this house of worship this morning of the shortness of life. Healthy dose of reality so that we don't end up with wasted lives. You want to spend your dash on what really matters, then learn from funerals. Secondly, we need to listen more to correction than to others singing our praise. Look at what verse 5 says. Listen more to correction than to others singing our praise. Verse 5 says, it is better to heed a wise man's rebuke than to listen to the songs of fools. It's in Proverbs 27, verse 5. You can just note this. It says, better is open rebuke than hidden love. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Now, we just passed through Valentine's Day, so hopefully you gave your loved one a good rebuke. What's wrong with you, Pastor? Good luck finding a Hallmark card that expresses that, by the way. But love speaks truth. How loving is it of me to be so nice that I don't say the hard thing to you? Proverbs 27 verse 6 reminds us that the wounds from a friend can be trusted. I mean, how much do you really love me if you see something in my life and not lovingly rebuke me for it? I'm speaking of constructive criticism, by the way, and not biting criticism that it's meant to hurt or just to get something off your mind. It's not what I'm talking about. But can you imagine what your life would be like if no one ever rebuked you? I mean, sadly, I got to be honest, we see the results of that in our society today as the younger generation growing up. But don't rebuke them, be nice. Let me ask you, have you given others permission to share a word of rebuke or advice when it's necessary? Have you given someone, please give it to me. If I need to hear that from you, tell me. Are you listening to the rebuke of others? A rebuke from that teacher, a rebuke from a boss, or a rebuke from a coach. You know, sometimes as parents, we kind of run in and we soften it and we go, oh, that person was mean. Sorry, child, you shouldn't have to go through that. Maybe you just need to leave it alone. You decide. Are we listening to the rebuke of others? Maybe it's from your spouse. Maybe it's from your dad. Maybe it's from your mom. It's better to heed it. Wise reflection instead of deflection. Now we do need compliments and encouragement. Mark Twain used to say, I can live for 2 months on a good compliment. And I say, well, you're a better man than I am. I don't know if I can go 2 months on just one. But the point of Solomon's words here is that we do not grow on praise alone. If all we hear is others singing our praise, then we will be no wiser for it. We live in a society where we avoid conflict. We are encouraged to only say that which is politically correct. I mean, why? You just can't upset others, you know. Don't offend anyone. And some of us heard growing up, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And I go, really? I mean, I'm not suggesting we go around and tell everyone we meet exactly what's on our mind. But loving correction from a trusted friend has value. Verse 6, Ecclesiastes 7 here, uses an analogy. It's a little difficult to understand and translate. But it says, like the crackling of thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of fools. This too is meaningless. It speaks of this crackling thorns under the pot. And I think the picture here is of branches of a thorn bush that are thrown into a fire in order to heat something up quickly. And those branches, if you threw them in, I remember at camp just throwing in these useless things that just erupted in flames. Like, whoa, that's cool. Didn't do anything to heat everybody around there. It was just really cool. It blew up so fast. That's what he's talking about. You throw in these thorn branches. They cause the flame to just kind of flame up with rapid intensity, providing a short, hot burn. It erupts in flames, but it isn't going to keep you warm for too long. It has no lasting value. That's his point. In the same way, if you just surround yourself with people who will say nice things to you and sing your praise, it will feel good for the moment, but it's also going to be gone quickly. That's certainly true of flattery. Flames up, gone quickly. Now, if you're going to spend your dash on what really matters and have a good name at the end of your life, if that's what you're shooting for, then you need to be able to handle the rebukes that come your way. I can think some of the hardest things ever said to me from a trusted friend, often through my wife, that have had lasting value on my life. I didn't like it at the time. I might have even tried to dig in and defend it, but later, I needed to hear it. I needed to hear it. Lasting value. And interestingly, verse 7 really seems out of place at first pass. It says, extortion turns a wise man into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the heart. And you say, well, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Well, the bribe, by definition, is anything that you would sell yourself out for in the name of convenience or to lessen the pain. And so when life gets hard, and you know you should listen to a little correction, everything inside of you screams for relief at that very moment, doesn't it? You want something, anything that will lessen the difficulty of your situation. You are at that very moment in a very vulnerable position to accept a bribe, a shortcut, a way around your pain. Don't do it. Don't give in. You will regret it. There was this boy named Jimmy who hated the bad times and the in-between times and wanted to live only the good times. One day he found this magical watch that allowed him to skip past the bad times and the in-between times and jump forward to the good times. And would you like to have that watch sometimes? Well, of course, Jimmy skipped his days at school. He skipped his meals and went to the dessert only. He skipped past rainy days that the sun always shined. He skipped baseball practice and went to the fun stuff of the game. He even skipped past all the other batters so that he was the only one who got his turn at bat. Well, great life. It's going great for Jimmy in this world of escape until he found himself getting weaker and weaker from all the skipped meals. He wasn't playing so well at baseball because of all the skipped practices. And Jimmy's world of escape and not living the bad times and skipping the in-between times wasn't God's plan at all. That children's story speaks to what is at stake if we really could skip past the bad times and the in-between times. Yet there are moments and there are days when we would love to own such a magical watch. I don't like this correction in my life. I want to skip past it. Can I fast forward? We don't like the tough stuff. One man said things were going really bad, and my friend told me, cheer up, things could be worse. So I cheered up, and things got worse. Ever feel that way? Ever wish you could just live in some world of escape? I mean, be honest. Don't you wish you could just simply fast forward to the good times? Don't accept the bribe. It only corrupts your heart. Oh, that bribe may come as an answer key to the questions on that test that will guarantee you a better grade. It's the easy way. Don't take it. Oh, it may come for you at work. It would be easier to kind of cut some corners or give the customer a little less than you contracted for or turn in this phony expense report. It's the easy way. Don't take it. Oh, it may come to us in our marriage. where it's more exciting to engage in some extramarital flirtation or having that little fling or not dealing with the hard issue that keeps getting in the way of intimacy. It'd be easy just to go around it. It is the easy way. Don't take it. It's a bribe. Corrupt your heart. Oh, it may show up in our parenting, where we might be tempted to buy our kids' approval rather than spend time with them. Or tolerate sinful behavior because I really don't want to go there. It's just so hard. It's the easy way. Don't take it. The long haul really is better than the shortcut. That is, if you want to spend your dash on what really matters. And that leads to a third nugget of wisdom. Thirdly, live a little bit at a time rather than all at once. Live a little bit at a time rather than all at once. He goes on, verse 8. Look at verse 8. The end of the matter is better than its beginning, and patience is better than pride. Often, we don't see things through to the end because we get impatient with the process. Life is lived a little bit at a time. We don't get to have it all at once. We don't get to have all the benefits of intimacy in marriage and all the benefits of closeness with the Lord and all the benefits of a strong relationships with others in a moment. See, our problem is we start out strong and then we get discouraged because we want to see that end result with all its benefits now. So we start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. We never get to the end, all because we're impatient. We hate the word guilty as charged, the word waiting. I wait for 10 seconds when someone has me on hold and I'm coming unglued. And what have you noticed about impatient people? They're angry people. Verse 9 says it this way, do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. See, fools are hotheads. When our emotions control us rather than the other way around, we're going to play the part of a fool. And the book of Proverbs has much to say to this issue of losing our temper. Now, I'm not proud to speak of this, but when I was younger growing up, I had a serious anger problem. Many times, things were lost in the moment of throwing them in anger, and many things broken, smashed, and damaged because I was quickly provoked. David Spencer's sitting over here. He knows some of that in my life. Don't ask him about it afterwards. I played floor hockey with him, and it wasn't pretty on my end. Anger. Anger. And only by the grace of God am I not what I used to be or potentially could be, but I know it's sure right there knocking on my door at the right moment. It would show its face. It wouldn't take much. See, wisdom does not come to the impatient, to those who blow up when his or her plans don't work out. Ones who will spend their dash on what really matters, live a little bit at a time rather than all at once. It's a little at a time that you build something that will last. 11 miles off the east coast of Scotland in the North Sea stands the Bell Rock Lighthouse. It has endured the ferocious onslaught of the North Sea's violent storms since 1811. It rests upon less than 1 acre of solid rock. That small reef is covered by seawater for 20 hours of every day. Now, the builder of the lighthouse, Robert Stevenson, and his crew of 65 skilled craftsmen had only 4 hours each day to crack away the stone and gouge a foundation in the rock. I mean, you talk about a little at a time. 4 hours a day. Go home, come back. 4 more hours. Go home, come back. And as a result of this painstakingly patient work, the 115-foot-tall lighthouse is still in use today. See, when you build your life a little at a time, it will stand the test of time. Are you building something? Am I building something that will last? Are you looking ahead to what you can be building? Taking the moment that you have to build, or you keep looking back to how it used to be. Verse 11 calls that unwise. Verse 11, do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it's not wise to ask such questions. Why is it not wise? Because you only get stuck in the past. See, there's a time to move on. But everyone loves the good old days, right? We have our retro music, which are song remakes of the 60s and 70s. My son would say, hey, I know that song. How do you know that song, Dad? They were playing it back in the 70s. It's a remake. We have a fascination with certain films and TV shows that bring us back to previous decades, don't we? That's why that 70s show was so popular. Even pro sports teams have throwback days when they wear uniforms of some earlier decade. We insist that things were better then. We easily fall back in the church to the way we used to do it, right? Would we really want to return to the good old days? A teenage son was heading out the door and he asked his dad for the keys to the car. He wanted to drive. He said, Dad, give me the keys. Well, the dad looked at his son and noticed his hair was getting rather long. Son, it's time that you get your hair cut. It's way too long. And the son argued, but Jesus had long hair. Father replied, yes, Jesus walked everywhere he went too. No keys. See, the good old days are highly overrated. Warren Wiersbe says this about the good old days: they are a combination of a bad memory and a good imagination. Wisdom's not gained by staring in the rearview mirror, because what will happen is you're going to collide with life coming at you. What lies ahead may be hard. Living in this tough time right now may tempt you to want to go back to when it seemed so easy. We may be like the Israelites who took 3 steps toward the promised land and then 2 steps backward toward nostalgia. Forgot about today. Don't forget about today. Today's all we have. How are you spending your dash? These nuggets of wisdom are for your taking. Are you growing in wisdom? Listen to what Solomon says as we bring this to a close. I'm really not able to develop this part, but he says in verse 11, wisdom like an inheritance is a good thing and benefits those who see the sun, which is just another way of saying those who are alive. He's saying leaving an inheritance is good. That's a good thing. But even more wonderful is leaving behind a good name, a good testimony. Verse 12, wisdom is a shelter as money is a shelter, but the advantage of knowledge is this, that wisdom preserves the life of its possessor. Gaining wisdom, he's saying, will protect you from the pitfalls in life, from wasting your life. That's why Solomon leaves us with these words, verses 13 and 14. He says, consider what God has done. Who can straighten out what he has made crooked? When times are good, be happy, but when times are bad, consider God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, man cannot discover anything about his future. That's the kind of perspective we need right there if we're going to live out our days, our dash, in a way that's honoring to the Lord. Right there. God is sovereign. We don't know the plot line, but God does. Believing that God is sovereign that allows us to live with the mysteries of life. When bad times seem better and life throws us a curveball, we must cast ourselves back on the sovereignty of God. As Calvin put it, God's eye is on history, and we could add, so is his hand. We live with this trust and God's sovereignty, that we won't understand all the mysteries, but he does. He has it under control. When we live with that trust, we can live our dash in enjoyment of the days we have and in knowing that we live for what really matters and that God sees how we live our dash, and we can count on him to use it and leaving our mark when we come to the end of our lives. All we have is today. We will not understand all that happens in life. Don't get hung up on that. Trust in who God is. Einstein's second wife was asked if she understood her husband's theory of relativity. She said, "No, I don't understand the theory of relativity, but I understand Professor Einstein, and that's all I need." We may not understand all that God is doing and the many complexities and mysteries of life, but can you trust the sovereign, good, and perfect God? Because really, that's all you need. It's all I need. Go spend your dash on what really matters. Listen to these words written by Linda Ellis called The Dash. She said, "I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her casket from beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of her birth and spoke of the following date with tears, but he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that she spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved her know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash." So think about this long and hard. Are there things you would like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what is true and real and always try to understand the way other people feel. And be less quick to anger and show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that the special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? How are you going to spend your dash? How am I? God, thank you for these nuggets of wisdom. They're put there by you. This isn't Solomon speaking with human wisdom. This isn't Solomon just giving some good ideas. This is you breathing out these very words that may sound strange at first pass, but are indeed very true. God, may we live what we have right in front of us today. Trust all the other things we don't understand to your sovereign hand and to who you are, and that we trust you because it's all we really need. In response to that, we give to you, we sing our praise to you, reminding ourselves and each other of how sovereign you are. In Jesus' name.